Come in. Shut the door behind you. There now. That's better. Storm's got teeth tonight. Don't mind the old grays. They've heard every tale I've ever told, and not one of them has complained yet. Sit yourself down. Warm your hands. A traveler ought never listen to a story while he's still shivering. Now then, you've heard of cold light walkers, haven't you? Most folk think they were born as monsters. That's the comforting lie. Truth is, every one of them had a name once. Tonight, I'll tell you about one who should have never been forgotten. His name was Durth Reslin. If you've never met a Dwergar, count yourself fortunate. Most surface folk know them only through stories whispered by caravan guards. Grim dwarves with ash-gray skin, raiders from the deep places beneath the mountains, slave keepers, that sort of lot. Like most stories repeated often enough, only part of it is true. Durth was born beneath stone older than memory itself, where rivers flowed black as ink, and the only light came from glowing fungi clinging stubbornly to cavern walls. It was a world without sunrise and without birdsong. To those there, it was simply home. His father cut iron from the earth. His mother shaped tools from it. Neither spoke much. Among the Dwergar, words were spent sparingly. A task well done needed no praise. A mistake required no shouting. Durth tried to be like them. He truly did. But there was something in him that never quite settled. While the other children wrestled in the dust or learned to swing hammers nearly as large as themselves, Durth found himself asking questions no one cared to answer. What's above us? His father would grunt, more rock. And above that, more questions. His mother would smile, though only when his father wasn't looking. It was the closest thing to encouragement he ever received. First time Durth saw the surface, he was barely 40 winters old, young by dwarven measure, old enough to remember every heartbeat of that day. A merchant caravan needed an extra pair of hands to guide pack lizards through a forgotten tunnel leading towards the spine of the world. The pay was poor, work dangerous. Durth volunteered before the foreman had even finished asking. The climb lasted nearly 2 days. The air grew colder, cleaner, till without warning, the tunnel ended. He stepped into sunlight. Real sunlight. He had no words for it. The warmth upon his face felt alive. The sky stretched farther than any cavern ceiling ever could. Clouds drifted like slow-moving ships across an endless ocean of blue. He stood there for so long that another merchant laughed and shoved him gently forward. First time, Durth stood, too stunned to speak. Don't worry, the old trader said. Wears off. But it never did. Most Dwergar returned home below the mountains, eager for familiar stone. Durth returned wondering when he could leave again. He found excuses, caravan work, trade routes, deliveries, anything that carried him beneath open skies. The surface fascinated him. He once spent nearly an hour watching a pair of ravens argue over a scrap of bread, while an impatient caravan master threatened to leave him behind. He laughed all the way back to camp. The others didn't understand. Most assumed he was simple. Perhaps he was. Simple enough to find the joy where others only found inconvenience. Years passed. Durth became known among merchants as dependable. He never arrived first. Never arrived last. If a wheel broke, Durth repaired it. If a horse threw a shoe, Durth fetched the blacksmith. If an old woman struggled beneath a sack of grain, somehow, the sack found its way onto Durth's shoulders instead. He rarely asked for coin. "Pay me next time," he'd say. Most never did. He didn't seem to mind. One autumn, a human trader asked him why. Why what? Why you're always helping folk? Durth frowned, as though the answer were obvious. Because today it's them. The trader raised an eyebrow. And tomorrow? Durth smiled. Tomorrow it might be me. The old trader laughed. You'll never get rich thinking like that. Durth looked around the busy marketplace. Wasn't trying to, friend. In time, people stopped saying, "The Duergar merchant is here." Instead, they said, "Durth's come." He became expected and welcomed. Children ran to meet his wagon before their parents did. He carved little toys from leftover scraps of hardwood during long evenings by the fire. Nothing fancy. Fox, a rabbit, tiny owl bear whose legs wobbled when it walked. He claimed carving kept his hands busy. Truthfully, simply like seeing the children smile. Reminded him that the world wasn't entirely made out of stone. If there was one place he loved above all others, it was Icewind Dale. Strange, isn't it? Most men cursed the cold. Durth admired it. Lakes glittered beneath winter stars like polished crystal. Snow softened even the harshest mountains. The people, well, people were hardy, honest, quick to share a hot meal with a traveler who had earned their trust. Durth believed Icewind Dale held the finest folk he'd ever known. He returned, year after year, town after town. Never stayed long enough to grow roots, always leaving with another friend. Had you met him then, you'd have liked him. Most people did. And perhaps that was the cruelest thing the Frost Maiden ever stole. Now, Durth Reslin did not arrive in Icewind Dale as a hero. That sort of thing matters. Heroes arrive with banners, blades polished bright with songs already waiting for them. Durth arrived with a crooked wagon, 2 stubborn goats, and a crate full of things nobody thought they needed until they saw them. Needles, buttons, lamp oil, salt, bootlaces, clay pipes, little iron hooks for hanging pots above hearth fires, bundles of dried cave mushrooms wrapped in wax cloth. A dozen chipped mugs he swore were lucky, though not one matched another. That was Durth. He did not sell wonders. He sold the small things that keep a hard life from becoming impossible. And in Icewind Dale, small things mattered. A warm sock could save toes. A sharp needle could mend a coat before the wind found its way in. A strip of leather could keep a boot together for 1 more mile. Durth understood that better than most. He traveled between the towns slowly, never rushing unless someone was hurt, His wagon creaked along the frozen roads from Bryn Shander to East Haven, from Targos to Bremen, from Tourmaline to the lonely little Dugan's Hole. He learned which inns watered their stew and which ones kept good firewood. He learned where the snow drifted deepest, where wolves liked to follow, and which roads were safest when the wind came down from Kelvin's cairn. He also learned names. That was his habit. A foolish one, some said. Names made business complicated. Names made deaths personal. Names made strangers harder to ignore. Durth learned them anyway. There was Mara in East Haven, who always needed thread but never admitted she was making blankets for the poor. Old Bellis in Bremen brought fish hooks every month despite having hands too stiff to fish anymore. Twin boys in Targos who waited for Durth's wagon because he always brought them broken trinkets to repair. A quiet speaker's clerk in Bryn Shander who saved apple cores for Durth's goats. And in return, the people learned him. They learned he liked his tea bitter. They learned he hated wasting food. They learned he could not sing to save his life, but would try after one cup too many. They learned that if Durth said he would return before first snow, then before first snow, somewhere on the road, that crooked wagon would appear. Folk began calling him the Smiling Gray. Not to mock him. Not after a while. At first, aye, perhaps. The Duergar with a smile seemed strange enough to deserve a name. But names change shape the longer people use them. Soon, the Smiling Gray meant comfort, meant supplies, meant news from other towns. Meant someone had made the road and lived to speak of it. Children liked him first, as children often do when adults are still busy being suspicious. They asked him whether all Duergar could turn invisible. He told them yes, but only when chores needed doing. They asked if he'd ever fought a mind flare. He told them no. But he had once haggled with a tax collector, which was nearly as dangerous. They asked if the Underdark had stars. That question quieted him. Then he reached into his wagon and pulled out a dark stone flecked with tiny chips of glowing blue mineral. These were mine, he told them. The children gathered in close. Not stars exactly, but when I was little, I used to pretend. He gave the stone to a girl who had lost 3 fingers to frostbite the winter before. Keep it by your bed, for the nights when the sky hides. Now I know what you're thinking. Too kind is Durth. Too soft for the dale. Maybe so. But listen close. Kindness is not weakness. Not the real sort. Any fool can be hard after life beats him bloody. Plenty manage that. Hardness is easy. Hardness asks only that you stop caring. Kindness costs more. Durth paid that cost often. Once, on the road north of Bryn Shander, he found a caravan half buried by wind-blown snow. One axle had snapped, the mule had gone lame. Merchants were arguing over which crates to abandon before the storm worsened. Durth did not ask who owned what. He did not ask who could pay. He unloaded half his wagon into the snow lashed their broken axle with spare iron, and gave them enough lamp oil to make it to the next town. When one of them promised repayment, Durth only shrugged. "Road collects from everyone eventually," he said. "Today collected from me." Another time in Tourmaline, a miner came stumbling into town with a shard of black crystal buried into his palm. Folk feared the mines in those days, and for good reason. There were whispers of strange things beneath the earth, things best left sleeping. Durth did not know healing magic. He did know tools. He boiled water, cleaned the wound, held the miner steady while the local priest worked. Miner cursed him, bit him too. Durth only laughed afterward and said, "Good bite, means he'll live." That was how he was. Not grand, not legendary. Useful. There's a holiness in being useful when the world is trying to break. For years, Icewind Dale rewarded him with just enough happiness to keep him coming back. He liked the markets in Bryn Shander, as loud as they were. The frozen lake at East Haven where lanterns glittered along the docks. Liked Lonely Wood best in summer, when the trees whispered and the whole world smelled of sap and wet bark. And he liked the people, even the difficult ones. Especially the difficult ones, maybe. "Easy folk have plenty of friends," he'd say. "Miserable ones need them more." But the Dale was changing. Slowly at first. Slowly, a man could pretend not to notice. The sun came late, then barely came at all. Then one day, it did not rise. You cannot understand what that does to people unless you've lived beneath it. A single dark morning is nothing. A week, folk grumble. A month, they pray. A year. A year without sunrise teaches fear to sit at every table. The cold deepened. The roads grew cruel. Snow buried signs and fences, sometimes whole cabins. Fish became harder to catch. Game vanished into the wilds, or froze where it stood. Trade thinned, laughter thinned with it. Durth still traveled. Of course he did. First, people praised him for it. "Mad old gray fool," they called him, but fondly. Carried letters between towns when couriers refused. Brought medicine through whiteout storms. Delivered a pair of boots to a boy in Caird Konig. His mother had paid for them 3 months earlier, and died before they arrived. Durth stayed for the funeral. No one asked him to. Then came the sacrifices. Not everywhere at once, not all the same. Some towns gave warmth. Some gave food. Some gave living souls. That is how evil settles in, traveler. Not as a dragon landing in the square, not as a warlord kicking in the gate. It comes as a meeting, a vote, a grim nod from tired people who tell themselves there is no other way. Durth heard the rumors in taverns and stable yards, a lottery in one town, a name drawn in another, gate open, a body left to the night. He did not believe it, not truly. He had looked into the faces of tin towns for years. He'd eaten their bread, mended their tools, carried their letters, held their children on his knee while telling silly stories about blind cavefish that wanted to become dragons. Surely they were frightened. Surely they exaggerated. Surely no town he knew would strip a neighbor bare and give them to the cold. One night, in Bremen, old Bellis told him otherwise. They sat in a fishing shed by a stove that smoked worse than it warmed. Outside, the lake ice groaned in the dark. Bellis had a blanket around his shoulders, a cup of something too strong to be tea in his hand. "Don't go east," the old fisherman said. Durth looked up from mending a harness strap. "East Haven?" Bellis did not answer at once. The stove popped. "Just don't." Durth smiled gently. "I have customers there." "You have a death wish there." That made Durth pause. Bellis stared into his cup. "They're drawing names now. Once a month, maybe more if the fear gets bad enough." "Names for what?" Bellis looked at him then, and for all the years in his face seemed to gather at once. "For Aura." Durth's hands went still. "No. Not East Haven." "All towns become the same in the dark." Durth shook his head. "People say terrible things when they're afraid." "They do terrible things too." For a long while, neither spoke. And Durth returned to the strap, his fingers moving slowly. "I'll be careful," he said. Bellis gave a bitter little laugh. "That's what kind men say before cruel folk prove them wrong." Durth did not argue, but he didn't listen either. That was his great flaw, if you want the truth of it. Not foolishness, not pride, faith. Durth believed people were better than their worst day. Most times he was right. And being right, so often, made the one time he was wrong far more terrible. By then, the roads had become nearly empty. His goats had died the winter before, one to sickness, and one to wolves. Pulled the wagon himself after that, harnessed across his chest, boots wrapped in extra leather, beard rimed white with frost. More than once, folk told him to stop. "Settle down. Choose a town. Take a room above a stable. Survive. like everyone else. Durth always smiled. Leave the road to people less stubborn? He could not do it. Somewhere, someone needed thread. Someone needed oil. Someone needed to hear that their brother in Targo still lived, or that their daughter in Bryn Shander had safely given birth, or that a friend had remembered them. So Durth kept walking, the smiling gray, moving through the long night with his little wagon full of ordinary mercies. There came a morning when Durth admitted the roads felt wrong. Not dangerous. Roads had always been dangerous. No, this was different. Empty. The snow fell still. The wind still howled. But the dale itself seemed to be holding its breath. It passed abandoned sleds, half buried beneath drifts, frozen fishing nets, stiff where they had been left upon the ice. A lonely cabin with its door swinging open in the wind. No smoke rose from its chimney. Durth called out. No answer. Left 2 loaves of hard bread on the table before quietly closing the door behind him. Perhaps someone would return. Perhaps they wouldn't. Either way, it felt wrong to leave an empty house emptier than he'd found it. By midday, he reached the crossroads. One side pointed towards Bryn Shander, the other, East Haven. He stood there longer than he cared to admit. Old Bellis's warning returned to him. Don't go east. Durth rested both hands upon the handle of his wagon. They're only frightened, he muttered. The wind offered no opinion. With a sigh, he turned east. The closer he drew to East Haven, the fewer tracks he found upon the road. Usually there were fishermen, hunters, travelers, other merchants heading one way or another. Now, only snow. It was nearly dusk when the town finally emerged through the glowing white. Its wooden pike walls stood dark against the storm. No lanterns burned upon the gate. No laughter drifted from the taverns. Even the dogs were silent. Durth frowned, gave the gate a friendly knock with the butt of his walking stick. A small hatch slid open. 2 tired eyes studied him. State your business. Durth Reslin? Silence. The merchant? Durth smiled. So I've been told. The hatch closed. He heard voices arguing on the other side. Then, heavy timber scraped across stone. Gates opened only wide enough for his wagon. One of the guards avoided looking directly at him. Long road. Longest road always seems to be the last few miles. Inside the walls, something had changed. The streets were full, yet no one spoke above a whisper. People moved with purpose, never lingering. Shutters covered nearly every window. Children were nowhere to be seen. That unsettled Durth more than anything. Children always found him. Always. parked his wagon outside the familiar inn. Normally the owner would have hurried outside, complaining that Durth was late again. Tonight, no one greeted him. He carried 2 crates inside himself. The common room, once filled with music and arguments over fishing, had become little more than a room full of tired people staring into cups they weren't drinking. When Durth stepped through the door, every conversation stopped. One by one, faces turned toward him. A woman he had known for years lowered her head. An old fisherman quietly removed his hat. Durth blinked. I'm beginning to think I've grown uglier since my last visit. No one laughed. The innkeeper finally emerged. He was thinner than Durth remembered. Older. You shouldn't have come. Durth chuckled. I've been told that twice this week. I'm serious. I've goods people need. I have goods people need. They don't. They always need lamp oil. The innkeeper walked closer till only the counter separated them. His voice dropped. You need to leave. Durth frowned. I've only just arrived. Leave. Have I offended someone? No. Then what? The innkeeper looked towards the windows, toward the square beyond. You don't understand. Durth followed his gaze. People were gathering outside. More than seemed reasonable. They're having a meeting. The innkeeper closed his eyes. You truly don't know. Know what? Long silence followed. Then the church bell rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. Every person inside the tavern stood. No one spoke. They simply walked toward the door, slowly, like prisoners answering a summons. Durth watched them leave. Festival? He asked. The innkeeper laughed. It was the saddest sound Durth had ever heard. No. Then what is it? The old man hesitated, his mouth opened. No words. The words almost came. Then he looked past Durth, toward the door, toward the waiting townsfolk. Fear won. I can't. Durth placed a hand on his shoulder. Whatever had frightened this man had frightened him badly. It'll pass. The innkeeper looked him square in the eye. No, it won't. Outside, the square had become crowded. A wooden platform stood in its center. Beside it, an iron lockbox. Durth scratched at his beard. A raffle? No one answered. He noticed something then. No one smiled. Not one face. Not a child. Not an elder. Only tears. Town speaker climbed onto the platform with the weariness of a man walking to his own execution. He unlocked the iron box, reached inside, and drew out the first parchment of paper. One after another, they came. The woman wept with relief when her husband's name wasn't called. A young man nearly collapsed after surviving another month. Durth looked around in growing confusion. He seemed awfully serious for a drawing. Still, no one answered him. Not because they hated him, because none of them possessed the courage to speak. The old speaker reached into the iron box once more. His fingers lingered among the folded scraps of parchment as though by delaying another heartbeat, he might somehow change what waited inside. When he finally withdrew one, he did not open it immediately. His shoulders sagged. The crowd watched in absolute silence. Even the wind seemed to soften, almost to listen. At last, he unfolded the parchment. His lips trembled open. Durth Reslin. For a long moment, no one moved. Durth blinked. Then, with some sort of awkward smile a man wears when he believes someone has made an honest mistake, he raised a hand. "I believe that's me." A few heads turned. No one answered. "I don't recall putting my name in." Still nothing. Durth looked towards the guards standing near the platform. "Surely this belongs to another Durth." The older guard lowered his eyes. "There is no other." A smile remained on Durth's face, although it had already begun to fade. "I'm only passing through." "We know." "I arrived this evening." "We know." "I've never lived in East Haven." "We know." Every answer came quietly, matter of fact, as though they had all rehearsed this conversation 100 times before. Durth's eyes drifted over the crowd. He recognized nearly every face. People he knew. People who knew him. Not one would look him in the eye. He laughed again. Only once. A nervous little sound. "I don't understand." The town speaker finally forced himself to speak. "It isn't a lottery." Durth looked at the iron box, then back to the speaker. The old man swallowed. "It only looks like one." The words settled over the square heavier than fresh snow. For a moment, Durth simply stared. He searched their faces, waiting for someone to grin, waiting for someone to admit the joke had gone far enough. No one did. Durth frowned. But you draw from the townsfolk. We do. Then why my name? Silence. Why? He stepped closer. My name. The younger guard shifted uneasily. The older one answered. It wasn't there. Durth blinked. What? Your name. It wasn't in the box. Hope flickered. Only for an instant. Then this is truly a mistake. The younger guard shook his head. No. Durth frowned. I don't follow. The young guard's jaw tightened. We added it. There it was. The truth. Small and simple. Durth stared at him as though he had spoken another language. The younger guard drew a slow breath. Several people began quietly crying. A woman buried her face against her husband's shoulder. Someone near the back whispered a prayer. Durth looked at them all, not with anger, with disbelief. So you chose me because no one would come looking? No answer. For what felt like an age, no one moved. Then the older guard stepped forward. His hand shook. I'm sorry. Durth looked at the man for a long while before answering. I believe you. He turned away, unable to bear another second beneath the merchant's gaze. Another pair of guards approached Durth's wagon. They began unloading it. Methodically, respectfully, as though packing away the belongings of a man already dead. Durth watched them carry each crate into the storehouse. The lantern oil, bundles of thread, spare blankets. One little wooden rabbit slipped from a guard's arms and landed in the snow. Durth instinctively stepped forward. Careful. Durth froze inches from a gleaming halberd and stood back up slowly. The guards continued their work. A third man approached him. Your pack. Durth handed it over without a word. Inside were only ordinary things. A whetstone, a change of socks, a pipe. 3 letters he had promised to deliver. The guard turned the letters over in his hands. If anyone still travels after this storm, he nodded toward the letters. Would you see those delivered? The guard could not answer. He simply tucked the letters carefully back into the pack. One last kindness. One last promise left hanging. Then came the cloak. Patched so many times that scarcely any of the original fabric remained. Durth had worn it nearly 15 winters. He closed his eyes, just for a moment, feeling the last pocket of warmth trapped beneath it, remembering countless nights beside roadside fires, the smell of wood smoke woven forever into its fibers. A guard stepped forward. The cloak. Durth opened his eyes. He did not move. His hands remained clasped around the collar. Not in defiance. Only reluctance. "I'll not be needing it where you're sending me," he said quietly. The guard's lips parted, but no words came. Very slowly, Durth unfastened the clasp. The cold found him immediately. The warmth he'd carried for years drifted away on the wind, almost at once. Durth rubbed his chilled hands together out of habit. This gesture made him pause. He realized, with quiet horror, he was already trying to remember what being warm had felt like. He had not even left the town yet. That should have been the end of Durth Reslin. Storm swallowed him before midnight. By morning there wasn't much as a footprint left upon the road. Only drifting snow. People of East Haven gathered his belongings. Letters he'd never delivered. Little wooden rabbit he'd carved for a girl in Bryn Shander. His old traveling cloak, still smelling faintly of smoke from 100 campfires. Some said they buried his things. Others claimed they locked them away, unable to bear the guilt of looking upon them. Truth be told, I've heard both stories. Perhaps they're both true. Folk of East Haven seldom spoke Durth's name after that. Not because they'd forgotten him. Quite the opposite. Some names become too heavy to carry. Years had passed. The winter did not. Rime held the dale in its frozen grasp, and the roads grew lonelier still. Merchants stopped traveling after dark. Hunters refused certain trails altogether. And then the stories began. First came from a trapper north of Bremen. He'd swore he'd seen a pale blue light weaving through the blizzard. Not floating, but walking. He called out, thinking another traveler had become lost. The light stopped, turned toward him, then vanished into the storm before he could make out a face. Most dismissed him. Snow plays tricks on tired eyes. Second tale came from a pair of fishermen crossing the ice before dawn. They claimed someone had repaired the lashings on their sled while they slept. Neatly. Carefully. Better than either one of them could have managed. There were no footprints around the camp. Only a small single carving left upon the seat of the sled. A rabbit. They threw it into the lake. Neither man ever spoke of why. Then came the strangest tale of all. An old widow in Bremen woke one bitter morning to find a bundle of firewood stacked neatly beside her door. No tracks, no wagon marks. Only a single gray thread caught between the top log. Same sort of thread Durth had once used to mend winter cloaks. Coincidence? Perhaps. Dale has always been generous with coincidences. Still, the stories kept coming. Travelers spoke of seeing a lonely blue glow standing upon distant ridges. Hunters claimed someone watched over forgotten roads. Children insisted there was a gentle giant wandering the snow who scared wolves away from those who had become lost. Adults told them not to be foolish. Adults always do. Then the adventurers arrived. Brave souls, well armed. Sort who goes looking for monsters instead of running from them. One by one, they returned with the same tale. Not of a ghost, not of a kindly guardian, but of something terrible. Who's to say what survives? Who's to say what doesn't? So if your road ever takes you north, if the snow ever begins to fall so thick you can scarcely see your own hands, and if through that white curtain you spy a pale blue light walking where no living soul ought to be, do not chase it. Do not call after it. Do not convince yourself it is another lost traveler in need of help. Simply step from the road, lower your eyes, and let it pass. For if there is even the smallest fragment of Durth Reslin still wandering beneath all of that ancient frost, then I'd rather he remember this world as one where, at least once, someone finally had the kindness to let him continue on his journey.